Hello, it's not a nerd. It's gonna be a Console.log vlog video. I'm going to talk in general about. It's almost the end of the year now. I've been doing a bit of WebXR dev, varying degrees of success for the last year. I did some contracting and also my own projects as well. And I'm going to just talk generally about my own feelings. Well, I stress these are my own opinions and thoughts on the current state of WebXR dev in 2022. Sort of like a summing up of my experiences, but also where I think, where the state of the current industry at the minute, and just all that sort of thing. I'm going to talk about my own plans as well. I'm going to continue working on these sorts of projects, and yeah, it's just going to be that. So strap in. So first I'll just talk a bit about the general state of things. So I think the general state of things is quite mixed. I think the feeling in general in the tech industry is it's a little bit panicked, maybe, obviously because of the layoffs of Meta and Twitter and many other big companies. Especially the one that probably is most worrying in terms of WebXR and the development of so-called metaverse spaces is the Meta layoffs. It seems to be, it's obviously going to affect the industry quite significantly, I think, in a lot of ways. I personally have never been that invested in the metaverse or the meta vision for AR and VR. I've never been that sold on the whole thing. I've tried it out a bit, like I've tried out on the Quest, and it's quite cool for a bit. I still do think that the main ways that this technology is going to be applicable and useful in the future is games, really, and also AR experiences and for learning and that sort of thing, which isn't often repeated. I don't think there is that much future still in developing. Nobody wants to do work from home in a VR headset all day. I still think it's a silly way to approach it. To be honest, I don't think there's much future in that. Like I know personally, I like VR. I'm not being cynical or down on VR in general. Like I've been developing my own VR projects as an experiment to see how far I can push it and that. But do I think it's going to be applicable to I don't know, like working from home and in a virtual environment that's basically just a replication of your existing setup? I just don't see what the point of that is. Like Zoom is fine, or other associated technologies is fine if you really need to do video conferencing with other people in your organization. I don't see what the benefit is from actually doing that in VR with low poly models. And like I said, I'm not down on this technology, but I just don't understand what the appeal is supposed to be of that. I mean, fair enough for Meta, they're developing and investing in this technology, and that's a good thing. Like, someone needs to invest in it and keep it going. But I do think that it's a risk, certainly, of becoming feeling like it's been a bit of a flash in the pan and a fad, certainly. But anyway, I'll talk about my own experiences. I can't go into specific details. Obviously, I can only talk about my own. I can't do that. It's just not professional. But I'll talk generally about my own experiences of contracting on a few WebXR projects for the past year and a half, actually, almost 2 years now. So it's been pretty mixed. Some of the experiences have had me very good. I worked for a creative industry, a sort of digital production agency who also deal with media production and that as my first big WebXR project. That was quite a big project. That was I don't know, over a year ago now. Well, just over a year. No, actually under a year. But that was for a big conference using 3JS and 8.4. that was a challenging project, but did manage to get it working. It's like a guided journey. I found that very useful. I thought the employer were very good people. They knew what they were doing. They were very focused, and also the creative people I worked with were very good teams. That was quite stressful because I was the only programmer who was actually implementing the WebXR functionality for the actual, and basically do the entire application programming. But I had a good experience on that project despite the troubles I had with implementing the SLAM tracking to the required basically just making it as accurate as possible. But I got there with that one. That was, again, I don't want to share too many details, but I'm not really under an NDA or anything. I've already completed it. It was a Green and Green Street project for the COP26. I was pretty proud of that. I was happy I got it done and it worked. So that for me is a win. Was a win. My other experiences, again, like I can't go into specific details because I don't think it's appropriate to talk about specific companies who employed me to do some of this work, but one organisation I worked for were very good. That was mostly doing play canvas builds in implementing WebXR. I got a project done for them as well, which is like a sort of arcade game, like a marketing arcade game basically. And that is I can't actually got a bad word against them. They are a pretty cool organisation and they do things pretty well. In fact, I will admit that the failing on my side of that project was, and I was working on several projects for them, but I had like a sort of midpoint of this year where I just, being completely honest here, like I sort of burnt out on stuff because I was working on too much stuff at once. I took too much on. I think if you are going to work in this industry doing WebXR based work, AR, VR development, work on that and that alone, because if you do what I did, which is basically I had like a pretty half year. Like I said, like I had a pretty successful year. I've created basically 3 or 4 different applications commercially. I worked on at least 3 or 4 commercial applications, 2 of which were all mine, more or less, pretty much, and some other contributions to some pretty big projects. So I've had successes this year, but also I think about just past midpoint this year, I really burnt out really badly, and it really did mess me up. And this is primarily because I took on too much. I took on another role, part-time role, on top of a contract role, which was, I did let the full-time contract role know about that. I thought I could manage it. What I learned is that no, that was just a terrible idea. I was just at my computer constantly, usually till about 10 o'clock every single night, programming and doing the other part-time thing I was doing, which was a bad idea. But it's a learning experience. So there is that. At the minute, like if you've been watching my channel, you'll know that I've been working on a few ambitious things. And what I'm basically doing at the minute with those projects is consolidating the things that worked for them, and they will probably continue in some form. But I'm consolidating wins from these projects. So the Papyrus 3D engine, for example, I managed to get like quite a fairly simple gaze-based movement system working. I've also just released the Room Creator tool and component system for that, for A-frame, which is actually quite useful. Can be built upon, of course, but it basically provides a simple component for that. I also did I've been exploring this year a lot about the generative art and generative VR stuff with A-frame component system. I did the RanGen component, which I think is potentially quite useful for some people, allowing you to generate random primitives or OBJ models. Again, I'm sort of concentrating now in my work around this area on components for A-frame basically, which are just useful. I'm probably going to bring out soon, I think it'll be my next thing, will be a templating system for implementing the room creator, but also implementing a simple gaze-based movement system for VR and for A-frame basically. And I've already done the code for that. I just need to, So, what am I saying? Part of the work I've been doing has been like these ambitious projects. We're going to start off with a crazy aim, like working on solar gold rush. A lot this year. I really did work on it quite a lot after when I had some spare time, and that essentially is a generative solar system generator thing. It's got huge glaring errors in it. It's like, I've not really shared the code publicly, but that can generate a solar system of a basic sort that you can navigate around. So again, I've been exploring procedural generation in terms of VR a lot, and yeah, it's been a hard year, but also a year of much learning. The industry as a whole, I think, is in a strange place in some respects. Like I think everybody's the hangover from the metaverse promise is sort of setting in, but there is still a lot of applicable platforms and technology to develop around this technology. So I don't think it's completely it's not like a spent thing. Obviously, AI art and AI generators and ChatGPT is all the rage at the minute. And I'm sure we'll continue to grow in its potential and promise. But for myself, like at the minute, I think I'm going to concentrate and go into the new year on tooling systems, basically developing useful tools, component libraries for A-frame mostly. My specialization seems to be more in the A-frame and play canvas area. Obviously, being a play canvas developer for years now, actually like 8 years on and off, like doing work on various play canvas things. So I'm going to continue to specialize in play canvas and A-frame. 3GS I've explored a bit more. Again, mixed degrees of success with that. Like I said, the first application I brought out, which I worked on in tandem with a production company, was a success. It was not without its own headaches, of course, but that's just development. And 8.4 is a cool platform, actually, if you've not tried that out. Only thing is, I would say, is that 8.4 is expensive, so generally speaking, I've only ever touched developing for 8.4 if I'm developing for a commercial client. It's worth learning though, and it's pretty cool with the cloud-based platform and everything, and the testing's fairly easy, actually, once you get used to it. Debugging and testing in AR and VR is actually still a bit of a area. You can download a developer extension, which is quite useful. I think it's called just XR something or other, but if you look on Chrome, that helps sort of testing just in the developer tab, I found, for debugging VR and AR applications. One more. So I think I need to probably start thinking of some interesting AR ideas. A lot of the stuff I've been doing recently has just been general, like 3D in the browser, which can be applied to AR or VR. But in terms of like doing more AR stuff, something I'd like to do, maybe gamifying, create some game project which utilizes AR in some special way. Like I said, I developed the Solar Gold Rush and Papyrus 3D, which are not finished, but I did learn a lot of interesting and good things along the way when I was working on those projects. Papyrus 3D, at the minute, like I said, I'm currently sort of getting the useful things out of that, and then I'll probably try and hone it back to being a full engine thing eventually. But yeah, so I'm basically, at the minute, my plan is to I'm taking a bit of time out. Like I said, I've had a bit of hard time recently. I've been I'm not going to go into details here, but my last work experience was not great, to be honest. I'm not going to go into it too much here, obviously, like I said, but I do feel on a certain level I was just thrown in the deep end and then thrown on the scrap heap after a few weeks. Just have not, so I think it's a much more brutal environment out there for developers. It's much more competitive. I think it's much more, it's just that, really. That was a little bit of a negative experience. Like I said, cannot go into details, I just can't, but I feel like the last job that I started working on was probably the most negative experience. I did have a sort of another negative experience with another company this year. I won't go into naming them obviously, but they did feel like just another, I'd say like a factory. You're not really seen as much of an asset there, was my experience. I didn't feel like I was being used. I felt like if I ever contributed any meaningful critiques which came with thought, then it was not, those concerns were not listened to, and that basically it was just a, I don't know, not very professional organisation. Like I said, I can't go into details of who I was working for. But then there was another British startup I worked for who, actually to be fair, were pretty good and treated me pretty well, but I sort of let them down a bit, to be honest, like I said, because I had a bit of a burnout from taking too much on. So anyway, personal lessons I've learned this year is like, don't take on way too much too fast. Also, just my main concentration now is just going to be continuing to develop these components and just moving forward with broadening my knowledge of just interesting tools I can use and component libraries, like I said. Anyway, I've rambled on for a little bit there. What do you think? How do you think WebXR has a much future? Like, what do you think the future is in that industry? Working as either a contractor or as full time or as a junior? How do you, if you want any tips on how to get into like working at a junior level, doing these sort of roles, these usual rules apply, I think, really. So, portfolio is important. GitHub profile, of course, is important. Demonstrate some creativity mixed with development knowledge and knowledge of languages like JavaScript, TypeScript, etc. React, maybe, if you want to use some sort of view or whatever, like, or A-frame, FreeJS, all this stuff. I've gone on for 17 minutes now, so I think I'll leave the video there. That's some of my like general thoughts, my general sort of summing up of the 2022 in terms of being WebXR developing. It's very cold at the minute, like it's just freezing, but yeah, I'm focusing the channel on developing useful tools, components for the community. I want to get back in the community. I'm near Edinburgh, so I've been going to the Edinburgh JS meetup. I'll hopefully get more involved in that, and yeah, I don't know, like I don't have a role at the minute, I'm not working now. Like sort of alluded to, I did have a recent disappointment in that regard, so yeah, I'm just sort of like, it's Christmas now, so I'm not really looking out that much, but I've been looking around a bit at some roles and just figuring out what to do next. I'll probably continue to work in this space, but I'm not that selective, but like, I don't know, like I've had mixed experience working for the industry, to be honest. I think especially because I openly acknowledge and very honest about the fact that I have bipolar disorder. That's been a mixed experience, being open about that. Really, it shouldn't matter, but unfortunately it does. I had a very negative experience, like I said. I had some seizures earlier this year, right? So like actual fits, and I got dumped by an employer really rapidly after that happened, which was, I mean, no matter how many ways you put that, it's a pretty fundamentally shitty thing to do. So I'm a bit riled about that. I feel a bit bitter, definitely, certainly as well, from that experience. Not so much now, like I've had, with a distance of several months, it's fine, but I feel like I want to concentrate more on independently focused work in terms of like programming, unless a IT project comes along or some project which is I feel I value online with. I'm not interested. So it's good to learn these things. And like I'm not a big head. There's plenty of stuff I need to learn still. FreeJS knowledge, there's certainly gaps there. Because just purely from not using it as much, I've used it obviously a few times. I did the COVID thing with it, the COVID tracker, 3D COVID tracker. I could certainly become a better 3GS developer though, I know that much. A lot of the time I'm still hacking that stuff together. A-frame is pretty, I'm pretty confident there now. Anyway, rambling for ages. Peace, like and subscribe, and obviously all that's big, quite a long Console.log, but I hope there's something of interest in there for anybody.